What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here. That's Andrew Ivins, and we are the Cover 3 recruiting hour as we get you up to National Signing Day coming up in December, the transfer portal in January, and we try to just kind of dive into everything each week from the lens of personnel. Ivins, what's going on, man?
Not much, bud. Another crazy weekend of college football. Man, I feel like every game I watch, especially in the SEC, it's like one score game. And certainly not the first one to put the take out there, but parity is here across the sport, right? I think every week, it feels more and more like the NFL. And we've been saying this for a while. So I'm glad it's all coming to fruition on the TV screens Saturdays.
Yeah, man, I absolutely. I think this is a fascinating time for this sport. I mean, we have, with the 12-team playoff, they're legitimately like 25 or 26 fan bases who are still like truly and earnestly believing that they're going to make the college football playoff or that they have a real, a real shot to make it. And that just wasn't the case when we had the 14 playoff. I mean, back then there was probably like 7 or 8, and like okay, it's going to be Ohio State from the Big Ten and maybe Indiana, but probably not, and now it's like just so many more teams have a reason to follow their team really late into the season.
But I think I saw a graphic somewhere on social media like Monday, and it was eliminated teams from the playoff, teams still alive, and teams in contention. And like Mississippi State was, I think, in the still alive category. And I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
But I guess the numbers say they're still very much in the hunt. No shots at Jeff Lebby and the Bulldogs there.
No, exactly. I mean, like just the more people have more reason to care. And a couple of teams out there now are giving their fans a reason to pay attention now because they're going to have a coaching change. One of those, of course, is the Florida Gators. A lot of people thought Billy Napier would be out. Last year he did save his tenure. Had a chance to run it back with DJ Lagway and a talented cast. And unfortunately, some of the issues that plagued him throughout his tenure from a negative standpoint just were never remedied. Right, the constant on-field sloppiness, they happened again on Saturday. We're running out 12 men for a critical play. I mean, you could write the Billy Napier epitaph and it would be the 12th man, basically, right? Which should be a Texas A&M thing. If it's a Gainesville thing, that's a problem. Like they had a lot like the same stuff at Utah. And I think there were a lot of like good things that he did there from a personnel standpoint for sure. Let's tackle this from the standpoint of like what could, in theory, a new guy be taking over there in Gainesville, and who are some of the players on this team who maybe other programs are looking to go after?
Yeah, but I think this roster is like pretty turnkey for whoever steps in. Like Billy Napier, is not leaving the cupboard bare at all. And I think you can go to that like Mississippi State game this past weekend. I mean, Florida, 2 true freshman corners played over 50 snaps, and that was due to injury. But I think specifically on the defensive side of the ball, they've recruited the high school ranks so well, and I've long looked at the 2 deep and I've been like that guy coming out of high school, like that guy coming out of high school. At some point they're going to have all these guys that are SEC caliber with NFL potential on defense, and then you flip it over to offense. Obviously, DJ Lagway, the quarterback, everyone's in love with Dallas Wilson and Vernell Brown, and Jaden Baugh, the running back. Now they're going to lose some starters up front on the offensive line. But again, like Billy Napier invested in that unit. It had 2 position coaches at one point. It was like, 5 + 1 = 1 when it came to the offensive linemen. So, they're going to lose Jake Slaughter. They're going to lose Austin Barber. I mean, 2 guys that were like preseason all SEC type of players, but Najee Harris comes back. Caden Jones comes back. So I think bottom line, like this roster is in a really, really good spot. But let me ask you this, like the fallout, it's always fun with the coaching changes. A lot of people are pointing to recruiting as being the issue. I don't necessarily see it that way. I mean, what's your assessment being a guy that's in the Sunshine State?
Yeah, I mean, I thought Napier did a good job recruiting. I don't think he was quite as good at it as Mario, but he was certainly way better than Mike Norvell at recruiting the high school level. I thought their player development was generally decent, right? I just think like they were, especially relative to the size of the staff with which he was afforded, and Florida really gave Billy every chance to succeed, both in terms of dollars, staff size, and patience, and that he failed is basically just on him. But plus, I think maybe some Lagway injury stuff, mixed in there. But I don't think that injury was really the issue here. Or sorry, I don't think recruiting was really the issue here in Gainesville. Honestly, like they got a lot of nice pieces in there. They did win some high-profile recruiting battles, and they also, I think, did a pretty nice job of scouting it and getting some of those sort of undervalued guys in some ways in. Like that's shoot. If you took Billy Napier's recruiting with Dan Mullen's coaching, you got a real winner there. I think we know what bad recruiting looks like in Gainesville. It looks like what Dan Mullen did. Not what Billy did.
I'm going to bring up two things. The first one's DJ Lagway. And, I try to raise my hand back during the spring. And as we got into preseason magazine season or whatever you want to call that, when you're at the grocery store and you got a Lindy's in front of you and it's like, all right, here's DJ Lagway's face. To me, that always felt a little rushed. And I know it's easy. Hey, hindsight's 2020. But having scouted DJ Lagway in high school as a junior, as a senior, we ranked him our number one quarterback, made him a 5-star before everyone else. Like, I never thought it was going to be best quarterback in the SEC, best quarterback in college football year 2, right? And I think injuries have certainly played a factor here. But, man, you pull up his 24/7 sports profile, Bud, like, the second line of my scouting report on DJ Lagway is like still very much a work in progress as a passer, but has improved greatly in every key statistical category. And then at the end, I say, likely going to need a developmental year or two, but could be utilized in situational packages and provide some magic. And I just think DJ Lagway, everyone got a taste of him as a true freshman because what he was able to do after Graham Mertz went down with an injury. But I always still thought like, hey, this is going to be a longer burn until DJ Lagway is playing as the number 3 player in the country, playing as the number 1 quarterback. And I think a lot of fans, when they look at the rankings, they assume these guys at the top of the board are just complete products and ready to go. Maybe Travis Hunter, maybe Jeremiah Smith have, kind of recalibrated expectations. But with DJ Lagway, it was still, hey, we love what he can be. We love the highs. We love, the traits, everything that he could be. But I just felt like it was a little rushed. And, ultimately, hey, maybe DJ Lagway saved Billy Napier's job. But at the same time, maybe DJ Lagway is the reason why Billy Napier's not here, because there was so much expectations heading into the 2025 campaign, and he was injured, and it just didn't work out.
So in looking at this, I mean, I'll certainly hand up guilty as far as like DJ thinking he was going to be a lot better this year than he was. Part of it, I think, is the sequencing, right? The fact that you had the LSU and Ole Miss games in succession last year, to me, was like, all right, maybe that's random sequencing of just 2 events happening back to back, or maybe he's kind of turning a corner. I think to your point that like the lack of an offseason, especially with some of the receivers for Florida, like that was certainly a concern going into the season, and one that I think really bore out. Obviously, like Dallas was hurt in the offseason. Trey Wilson was hurt as well. I mean, he's not really like a true downfield, like full route tree type receiver. And then you had what? You had Mizell, you had Sturdivant come in. Yeah, like they did not really gel, and it showed. And also, I just don't think that Billy's offense, he just should not be calling plays for a high level program. I don't think that this offense is any kind of special. I think he's really good at recruiting. I think he's good at hiring people for the most part. I just don't think this offensive stuff's a strength. Maybe quarterback coaching is a strength. When we went to that little presentation he did at Nike, like a lot of people liked the quarterback coaching thing he did.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, like, I'm not an X and O's guy. I'm not going to diagnose the coaching staff. I will say this: just what is burned into my memory is DJ Lagway at the Elite 11 finals, right? The summer before his senior year, and then it was the growth he made from then to the end of his senior season, led his school, Willis, the Wildcats with a K, to their best finish in like 60 years. It was huge strides. And I don't think since he's arrived in Gainesville due to injury, he's been able to make those same strides. Like you got to throw passes, right? You got to see live defenses. And I think that has hampered him. But the other thing I also want to bring up, because like I said, there's a lot of, takes and opinions on what went wrong with Florida. Like, I don't think recruiting is an issue. And if you go back to this time last year, Florida's 2025 recruiting class, so that's the one that includes Vernell Brown, Dallas Wilson, all the young guys, it was sitting 50th in the rankings.
Yeah.
50th. Okay. And that's because everyone thought Billy Napier was going to get fired. Now, DJ Lagway, like you said, he leads them to victories over Ole Miss, LSU. Florida shoots all the way up into the top 10, right? And I just don't think like recruiting is the root cause. Billy Napier went out and got DJ Lagway. He got Jaden Ball. He went to different parts of the country. And why I bring that up going outside of the Sunshine State is NFL draft trends continue to signal that the players coming out of Florida, like the high profile ones, aren't hitting. And I wrote about this after the 2025 NFL draft, right? So back in May, Florida just had one player selected in the first round. So the state of Florida, the kids that played high school football in Florida, aside from IMG Academy, a lot of those guys are transplants from all around the country. Just one player drafted. That's after 5 2 years ago and 4 this past year. And you spin it ahead to the 2026 NFL draft. I think it's going to be another down year for the Sunshine State. And I wrote about it for 24/7 Sports, like talking with different college contacts, talking with, personnel guys, GMs. Hey, what's up here? And what I kept getting back is the recruits in Florida, the high profile ones, usually don't have a foundational base compared to some of these kids in California, but really Texas and Georgia, where high school football is king. The other thing is, in Florida, you can just transfer high schools and there's zero punishment.
Yeah.
There's multiple like 4 and 5-star recruits this season that have started at one high school, played games, and are now at another high school. I mean, it's kind of the Wild West here. One staffer told me, like, yeah, that transaction nature just doesn't really go away. And then the other thing, the high school football coaches in the state of Florida are amongst some of the lowest paid in the country. But you're up here in Orlando.
Yeah.
We go back 5 years ago. Like, I had to make a list of the top 5 high school football coaches in Central Florida. Those guys are all coaching in Georgia, Alabama, or South Carolina now. They're going to go get paid and take care of their families elsewhere. So, why I bring that up is you see these stories out here. It's like, well, Florida could have done a little bit more on the recruiting trail. It's like, well, could they have? I mean, let's go through some of these 5-stars like that from recent years from Florida. Like, do they make the roster better? Does Keon Keeley make Florida better? Probably not. Does Jordan Hall at Georgia make Florida different? I don't think so. Zay Mincy at Alabama, we'll see. Florida was always going to struggle to get the IMG Academy offensive linemen because, again, they come from other parts of the country. Like CJ Baxter, Hakeem Williams, are those guys different makers? I don't think so. Cormani McClain, I mean, he's now at Florida. So I just find it interesting. And I know we're going to talk about Florida State, but this blue chip high-end talent in the Sunshine State just really isn't meeting expectations. And Florida has built their recruiting classes through the backyard, and they've supplemented in Georgia, Texas, all around the country. So I don't think recruiting's really the downfall for Billy Napier. And again, I think whoever steps in, like this roster, you're going to need to get some transfer portal guys, but it's going to be ready to go, especially if they can hold on to DJ Lagway.
Do you think that Florida recruits now, relative to their star ratings, are subject to a wider range of outcomes?
Absolutely. And I think it's just those 3 reasons I've said, Bud. Like, you go to Texas, you go to Georgia, those kids in middle school are in the squat rack. That does not exist in the state of Florida. And why does that matter? Like, you have to have this foundational base, because when you show up on these college campuses now, almost everyone's enrolling early, and you're in an environment where it's dog eat dog, right? They can just push you out the door right away. And then you have these kids that a good bulk of them coming from Florida, have been to multiple high schools that have never had to face adversity. They've just left and gone to the other school down the road and found playing time. So it's certainly something that I have my eye on. I'm not saying like, hey, Florida is not producing talented football players, but I think when you get these guys that are anointed at an early age, it's very easy for them to lose focus of what the end goal is at some point down the line. And, again, we're going to talk about Florida State, but you think about Florida as well. Like when the spine of your roster, the locker room is these guys that, haven't had to fight for playing time and haven't had to do it around the year. I think it's really easy for those guys to check out.
Dude, completely right. I agree with you on that. I wonder if we're going to see more sleepers come from Florida because we are so much further away from the finished product.
Well, look at the 2026 upcoming NFL draft, right?
Yeah.
I mean, still a long time to go. I think the state of Florida, aside from the IMG kids, is going to have 3 potential first-round picks. Ruben Bain, right? War Daddy, he's awesome. A kid out of Miami Central. Yeah, we didn't have him as a 5-star. Hindsight, should have been a 5-star prospect. Still top 75 player for us. The second guy, Fernando Mendoza, former Yale quarterback commit, that has become the darling of NFL talent evaluators. And then the third one is Emmanuel McNeil Warren, a safety at Toledo. So like that's the crop of homegrown Florida players that could go in round 1.
I mean, that's like, think about the variance in the ranges there. Not that other states don't have 3 stars go pro, but like that's pretty extreme. Yeah, man, I thought you did a great job breaking down Mendoza last week. And it's not just hard for you putting the star ratings on these guys. It's hard for all these college staffs. Like think about all of these college staffs who, have 10 or 12 people on the recruiting side who are all paid, pretty good money to evaluate this kind of stuff. And they whiff on the state of Florida too. It's in a weird spot, I think. I agree with you. Like it used to be like, hey, if a kid came from this program, you could pretty much count on certain things with him. And now it's like, even if you think the program produces that, if the kid's only been at the program for a semester, like, are they leaving an indelible mark on him as a player? Is that really like, has he really truly come, through their system? I don't know. It's interesting. Let's go ahead and take a look here, sticking on the Florida topic, of some priority commits that the Gators need to keep. And you have 2 highlighted here. Obviously, Davian, the receiver, and then Will Griffin, the quarterback out of Tampa Bay. Why are those 2 like the must keep for the Gators in your opinion?
Yeah, let's start with Davian Groce, fascinating prospect out of Frisco there in Texas. I mean, again, hey, Florida going back into the Lone Star State under Billy Napier. That's where DJ Lagway's from. He's a kid that's been or was injured to start his senior season, but he's played in 2 games, bud. He's got 15 catches for 373 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's almost 25 yards per catch. Interesting year nationally when we talk about the wide receiver position. Groce is someone where it's like, we thought he was a running back. We had him at the Navy All-American Bowl last year, and we were trying to get him to play running back. I'm backing off. I think this guy's a wide receiver now, and I think he might be, potentially a top 5 wide receiver in the country. So I think whoever steps in at Florida, offense is obviously going to be a major focus, just given what happened with Billy Napier. And yes, Dallas Wilson's there, Vernell Brown's there, Aiden Mizell's there. Like, you got to keep reloading that wide receiver room, and the game breakers at the receiver position come with a high price tag in the transfer portal. So Groce is one to certainly know. And, I think as we get closer to signing day, and this is already happening, but these staffs are going through the senior tape and they're looking to improve their commit list. And Groce is in a state where there's a lot of football teams, a lot of Power 4 programs. To me, like, Texas would make some sense here for them to turn up the heat on Davian Groce, Texas A&M as well. So he's one where I think when I looked at the commit list, it's like, all right, I think this guy has impact potential in the SEC, and it might only be a year or 2 away. The other one, Will Griffin, quarterback. He is Tampa Bay, I guess the Metro's all-time leading passer. He's only one of 10 quarterbacks in Florida high school football history that has thrown for 10,000 yards. He passed Tim Tebow on that list, and it's funny because he kind of looks like Tim Tebow. To me, Bud, this one's important because I think there's going to be some changes to Florida's quarterback room, right? Again, we'll see what happens with DJ Lagway, but behind that, they got Tramel Jones, who's a true freshman, hasn't really been thrown into SEC action yet. I personally would have Will Griffin ahead of Tramel Jones, just like if we were ranking that quarterback room and floors and ceilings. And Will Griffin's a kid that, he bleeds orange and blue. We had him on the CBS set there back at the Elite 11 finals. I thought he gave the best interview out of any of the quarterbacks out there. A guy that's going to be a 5-year starter in high school. And to me, like, this is a guy that's going to be increasingly important for Florida to have in that quarterback room. I think, Bud, what we've learned is, like, you're only good as your number 2 QB. And I'm not saying Will Griffin can't start in the swamp at some day, but man, if he can be that, steady Eddie in your quarterback room, I think that's very important, because at some point, whoever your starter is likely going to miss time, and you have to have some guy that can step in. And to me, I think Will Griffin makes a ton of sense there.
So I agree with you. I also think, man, like in today's day and age, if you can get a player who really wants to be there and like it is a Gator like that, to me, I just think that helps, man. I do like it helps with culture, especially if the guy's a quarterback like that. That makes a world difference to me, at least. All right. So first calls for the new staff. Of course, if it's the staff is in by signing day, which we have to kind of discuss, because of course, if they're going after Lane Kiffin, the chance he's there by signing day is very little, unless Oklahoma takes care of Ole Miss this weekend, and then Ole Miss drops another one. And then, given that Ole Miss doesn't play anybody in the non-conference, they are like completely dead at 9-3 as far as their college football playoff hopes. And then he could be there, the day after the Egg Bowl if he wants to take the job. But some of these other candidates they're going after are very much in the playoff hunt, so may not be able to. Who are like the first calls if you are Florida's new staff that you need to make, you think?
Well, but I want to point this out real quick. All right. So signing day is first Wednesday, or signing period, first Wednesday of December. Like you said, college football playoff teams are going to be playing well into January. And we're starting to see the shift in the pivot, but I think we're going to see more general managers that are not tied to head coaches. Like Jim Nagy at Oklahoma comes to mind, because imagine if Florida, they have a general manager, but it was a guy that really wasn't tied to Billy. I mean, he could be evaluating this roster right now. He could be feelers out on the transfer portal, doing your homework there, which Florida's already doing. But someone that is not tied to that regime, I think that is the future. If this landscape kind of settles right where we are right now, Florida, we're obviously going through senior evaluations in the Sunshine State. Two names that like come instantly to my mind. And I know I've just talked about Davian Groce as a wide receiver, but Samorian Wingo out of the St. Augustine area, and then Naeem Burrows out of Jacksonville. Like, these guys are playmakers. Samorian Wingo reminds me of Jeremy Bernard at Alabama. Big physical cat, heats up after the catch. Committed to Miami, and Miami has done an excellent job with him. But I put him in Wingo and Burrows together because, Jacksonville, Duval used to be like this Florida stronghold. They would get whoever they wanted, and that has not been the case in recent years. Again, I think Florida, whoever they hire, are going to be heavy on the offense. They're going to need wide receivers, right? You got to keep loading that room. And then 2 edge rushers in the state of Florida. Another position with a high price tag, the good ones in the transfer portal. Jake Krull at IMG Academy, a kid originally out of Orlando. Florida was in on him. Everyone in the country was in on him. Committed to Oklahoma. But this is a guy where I think if whoever is hired, like, you got to make the phone call. You got to go check him out. Extremely polished pass rusher, can get to the quarterback, full menu of moves, elite in a combine setting. Is he first off the bus? No, but man, he can go. And then the other edge rusher, Ashari Charles, committed to Miami out of Venice High School, one of the top programs in the Sunshine State. Damon Wilson, who's making plays from for Missouri. He's another Venice grad. I'm not saying he's Damon Wilson, but he ain't far behind. So, guy that can create upfield push. I think in his last 21 games, he's forced 6 fumbles hitting the quarterback. Guy that can create some turnovers. So, I think whoever steps in for Florida, it depends on when they're there. But there are guys that they can add to this recruiting class that Florida fans should be excited about.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, so generally the Florida candidates that you're going to hear in the media are Lane Kiffin, Drinkwitz. I've heard some Jed Fish, obviously. Maybe Fran Brown can interview. It seems like a bit of a long shot that he actually get the job, given how Syracuse's season is going this year. What about Rhett Lashley? I know that's a candidate you've been thinking about. Sell me on Lashley.
Yeah, bud. I mean, I'm sure you're in the. Florida fans all around you. I was in the clubhouse on Sunday after the news kind of broke. Just interesting to hear like these candidates out there. I have not seen a ton of Rhett Lashley, and I think he's a sneaky candidate that makes a ton of sense, not only for Florida, but like really any of these jobs that open up. Got SMU to the college football playoff last year, right? Has yet to lose a regular season ACC game. He has won with what I would consider like average quarterback play throughout his career. De'Aaron King at Miami, Kevin Jennings at SMU. Like Kevin Jennings, really good college quarterback. Are these NFL guys? I don't think so. You look at SMU, has built this roster through the transfer portal and then high school recruiting as well. He's also coached in the SEC. He was Auburn's offensive coordinator for 3 years. He was also Miami's play caller. He has had to recruit in the state of Florida, the state of Texas, and the state of Alabama. Like, what kind of base do you want right there? And then the other thing that stands out to me about Rhett Lashley, who can score points, and Bud, you saw this at the player personnel symposium there in Nashville back in August. He's got a monster support staff. And I'm not trying to like compare him to, Billy Napier, army of people or anything like that, but they have pushed all the right buttons when it comes to assembling a monster of a recruiting operation. So I don't know, to me, like you read these names, like Jed Fish, the more you dig into, Rhett Lashley, the more you dig into him, the more it makes sense because he's been a Power 4 head coach, because he's had to recruit all these areas, because he's an offensive mind, because he can navigate that transfer portal. So he's one where, I guess I'm pushing it into the internet sphere.
I don't hate it. I mean, like I think if you look at it, people are going to say SMU, not really like an elite program like that, but SMU is probably like they're a top half job, I would say, in the P4, most likely. Like he has had to win, some of these top recruiting battles. So like he's had to replace, some staff, which obviously is not always difficult to do. I think that's an important thing. Like if you show me you can go out and actually like increase your range in your coaching tree and hire different guys after ones you have leave, like that's I think a hallmark of a guy who understands how to be a head coach and like the ability to evaluate coaches and bring them in. Because like you're going to lose them if you do a good job. Like those guys are going to get promotions elsewhere. That's a pretty important thing. I don't hate that. I don't know if Florida fans would be super excited about that because I think they just have all their eggs in the Lane Kiffin basket, right? Which we don't know if he's going to take that or not. Maybe he will. I don't know. Or maybe he'll announce before the show gets published that he's taking some kind of extension at Ole Miss. I truly don't. I don't know, but like you could certainly do worse than Rhett Lashley for sure. I don't hate that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to come up with a realistic candidate. And like, I'm not saying Lane's not realistic, but hey, like, again, when you kind of dig into him a little bit more, but I think this would apply to other jobs. It's not like just Florida. It's like, why isn't his name being discussed more? I should say.
The expectations on Lane are also just way different in Gainesville than they are in Ole Miss, right? Like at Ole Miss, he can do what he did last year and like not get fired for a long time. You go 5.
Florida won the game because a defensive tackle that was close to 400 pounds 2 years ago dropped back into the flats and picked off a pass, a true sophomore. Like, that's kind of elite player development, in my opinion. And Billy was booed off the field.
He also, I think he was done after the USF game.
Yeah.
I mean, like most likely, but yeah, I agree. Like the expectation, the Swamp is way bigger pressure cooker than the Grove. It just is. Okay, so let's stay here in the state of Florida real quick. Evaluating some recruiting classes of other hot seat coaches. So FSU athletic director Michael Alford issued a statement basically saying this is unacceptable, and we'll do a full comprehensive review of the program after the season concludes. Which to me is basically stop asking us about this every single day. We should have a decision by the end of the year, if not sooner. Also, hey, if I fire this guy right now, is my job at risk as well? If I'm the AD, I think significantly so. Yes. So I think Florida State will have a new coach for next year for sure. But they have a couple nice commits in this class. I like Jay Timmons. I like Chauncey, but both DBs, which is something Florida State's done a pretty good job of, recruiting the position under Mike Norvell, not really anywhere else. Why do you like these kids so much?
Because they can play, Bud. We'll see what happens with Florida State, but when you peek at the commit list through a trained eye, like those are the two names. Obviously, Chauncey Kennon's a 5-star prospect, cornerback, has all the tools. Like he's the one that I think the common man's going to know. But Jay Timmons, I think for Florida State, and you kind of touched on this earlier in the show, Bud, like you need kids that care. Jay Timmons cares, and I think he cares about Florida State. He's the son of a former Noel legend. Timmons. Yeah, Lawrence Timmons, 3-phased impact player up there in Pittsburgh, helped Pine Richland win a WPIAL 5A championship as a junior, but I think that's one of the most underrated leagues nationally.
Okay, now for those who don't know, that is the Western Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletic League?
I don't know.
It's not intercollegiate, right? Because intercollegiate would be colleges.
Right. I just think the football there continues to improve. And Florida State got ahead of the curve here, right? Jay Timmons was committed to Indiana and SIG, popped off on the camp circuit, like elite testing numbers. Florida State's able to pull off the flip, and now they're going to have to play defense. Ohio State's sniffing around, but I think whoever Penn State hires, like this would be my first call for Penn State, just because I think Jay Timmons is a really, really good football player. Does it in all 3 phases of the game. Wide receiver, does it on defense, does it on special teams. I think he's an elite nickel. It's weird to be kind of, being like, hey, nickel difference maker. But I think for Florida State, again, like someone that would be bought into the program, returning Florida State to what it could be at some point down the line. Jay Timmons, reports out there he's going to visit Ohio State officially in a few weeks. Like, to me, if I was, in those football buildings, that would be the guy I'm like, got to keep him here, right? Whenever Norvell's out on the road, that's like the first stop. I think they got to keep him there, or whoever takes over at FSU.
All right, let's pivot here to Wisconsin, which unbelievably seems like it's not going to make a move from Luke Fickell, but they issued a statement talking about how they need to have like full commitment to football. Are they just going to gas this thing up with some NIL for next year and then decide to make a move? I know on Cover 3 we've discussed a lot. Like, if you make a move, it might also be Chris McIntosh's job as well. That's the AD there for Wisconsin. They do have some players that I think other teams would be taking a look at here nationally who are really important for the Badgers to keep, though.
Yeah, well, Bud, they don't want to make a move, but can we point out they're number 56 overall nationally in recruiting. Yeah. They're number 14 in the Big Ten. They have 15 commits, which is not a lot. So maybe they are saving some space for the transfer portal. But Wisconsin's on pace to sign its 3rd worst recruiting class in the 24/7 sports era. That's after they had the 27th class in 25 and the 23rd class in 24. I can't figure this out. They've had some moving parts on the personnel and in the GM side there, but man, like Luke Fickell, what he did at Cincinnati has not translated to Madison. Like, yes, they've signed some guys we like. Mason Posa was a 4-star linebacker last year. He's getting more and more reps, but it's like, why wasn't he getting more and more reps earlier? Like, are you guys trying to win? I thought one of the big things was with Wisconsin last season, is it was puzzling to me that they did not play their young players. You knew it was going to be a wash of the season after the injury to Tyler Van Dyke. You needed to get those guys developmental reps in meaningful minutes. And Wisconsin really didn't do that. And I thought that was interesting. Maybe they were playing some portal defense, didn't want them to get to the magical 200 number in snap counts, and everyone in the country is evaluating them. But that was puzzling to me. They have two commits I love, Bud. Jaden Petit, wide receiver out of Naples. This kid is having as good of a senior season as anyone in America. In 6 games, he's got 48 catches, just over 1,000 yards, and 19 touchdowns. 6'4", big guy that can win jump balls on the outside, but he's also sneaky after the catch in terms of how he's able to make people miss. Washington offered him a scholarship last night. I think anyone that takes one of these job openings, when that new they get set up and operations humming, Jaden Petit is going to be very, very attractive because he's big, he can move, and he's producing. The other one is running back Amari Latimer. He's out of Georgia. It was a big win for the Badgers back during the summer months. I mean, Georgia Tech, Georgia, were all kind of involved in that recruitment. He picked Wisconsin, and now Ohio State's interested. Reports out there that Miami is interested in Amari Latimer. 230-pound running back, Bud. I mean, this guy keeps runs on the tracks. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Phil Maffa. So those are the two for Wisconsin. It's a disappointing group, but star power, right? Like in the ideal world, Fickle, if he stays, like those guys are in the lineup week 1 of 2026.
Ivins, when I look at this, I don't think that Wisconsin properly calibrated the difficulty of going from the Big Ten West to the Big Ten without divisions. And I think 3 of the 4 programs that you brought in, USC, Oregon, Washington, not really in that order, are probably like better or likely better on average on any given year than the Badgers are. And then you go out and you play non-conference games in recent years against, now I know this wasn't Fickle, but LSU, home and homes against Bama, playing Notre Dame and Green Bay. I don't think Wisconsin's the type of program that needs to be playing like a top 10 non-conference opponent when you're already playing non-conference games. Like let Ohio State or Oregon do that, but like that, you're not that program, and that seems incongruous with the resources that they have there. And I also think it's fair to say, look, you couldn't have known this at the time, but maybe Fickle's success at Cincinnati was in large part due to his staff, which has now scattered across college football. Much of it has landed in South Bend, and they're doing a great job there. But maybe it was the assistants. We got into this topic yesterday on Cover 3. Is it Brent Key or is it Buster? Right? If you get Brent Key, if you go and get Brent Key for Florida or wherever, are you getting Buster too? Because Buster's the one that Kirby can't solve and seems to do a tremendous job with that offense, and Brent does a great job of physicality in that program, promoting big, big people, and has a lot of former linemen on both sides of the ball as assistants and recruiting assistants, whatnot, and try to build that culture. And certainly he is due a lot of credit for the success there in Georgia Tech, but also the assistants matter. And Cincinnati had Mike Denbrock, and it turned out he's really awesome. He crushed it at LSU, and now he's crushing it again at Notre Dame. Maybe it was more the assistants that Fickle had than it was Fickle at Cincinnati, and that success is not transferable. I don't know, just spitballing here, but certainly the scheduling has not helped Wisconsin either. They have had a murderous row of opponents. I don't even think if Fickle was doing a good job, I still don't think fans would be satisfied because the schedule is that much harder than it used to be.
I'll add this: they got to figure out quarterback, and
yes,
it's been injuries with the transfers. But I do think Wisconsin, they've been involved with some quarterbacks I really like that are currently in high school. Now they haven't got these guys, but they seem to be well aware of what the issue is. Travis Burgess, Elite 11 quarterback from this past year, committed to North Carolina. Wisconsin, I think, got him on campus twice. there's a few. Izzy Abrams, the 2027 out of Illinois, who's our number 2 quarterback for 24/7 Sports in the 2027 cycle. He has visited Wisconsin, so they are at least trying to address what I would consider a major issue.
Absolutely. All right, so Auburn here. Hugh Freeze has lost yet another SEC game. Doesn't seem like he's quite as good of a coach now that everybody can pay players. His strategy back when he was from Ole Miss doesn't seem to be quite the edge that it once was. Number 33 overall, number 12 in the SEC, 14 commitments. They've never finished outside the top 25 in recruiting rankings in the 24/7 Sports era, and they've only had 3 classes outside the top 15. They do have some nice players to hold on to here. This does not seem like it's likely to. I think the odds that Freeze is the coach there next year are low. I don't know if you would agree on that.
Yeah, but when I was kind of putting the topics together, I was shocked by the fact that they've never had a recruiting class finish outside the top 25 dating back to 2012. It was always billed as a smaller group for Auburn, right? That was kind of the message coming out of the Plains. If early in the cycle, it was kind of like, hey, they're sitting in the 50s. When are they going to make a move? So Auburn spent a ton in the transfer portal, right? You also have to remember here, like, you are budgeting year over year. You want to give yourself an opportunity to be active in the next transfer portal window. And, that can put you in a crunch. And I think when you look at Auburn's 2026 class, right, the one that's going to sign, a little over a month from now, this is the byproduct, right? It is a smaller group. There are some parts I really like. I think linebacker Jaquez Wilkes, he reminds me of Deontay Lawson, in-state kid, 2-way player doing 1A competition. I mean, he's a man-child out there. To me, like, that's the guy that they absolutely have to hang on to. I think you could put Braylon Womack, the 5-star safety, in the same bucket. Front 7 defender, I'm going to value a little bit more than a guy on the back end, but those two are really nice. And then wide receiver Jace Matthews out of Mississippi. I know Auburn is loaded at that wide receiver position, but Jace Matthews, to me, wide receiver 1 upside. Only played in 3 games as a senior, tore his ACL, but man, you want to talk about like 2 minutes of highlights that can get you fired up. Jace Matthews is in that department. I don't know, bud, what's going on here. Like, Saturday night, watching Auburn versus Missouri, you kind of look at that score bug and you're like, how is Auburn 0-4 in the SEC? Like, it's puzzling. And yes, there are certainly a ton of reasons, but given how they've recruited, what they've done in the transfer portal, you got to be better than 0-4.
I mean, I think like they did such a good job building this roster up and down it just with one position that they screwed up twice in 2 years. Like they chose poorly with Peyton Thorne, and the line from people I talked with at Auburn basically like, hey, like, we're not really ready to win anyway. Like, we're still building this through the high school. We're going to supplement via the portal. And in this time around, like, unfortunately for them, I don't think the transfer portal was as fruitful this year at the QB position. More teams did a better job of holding on to the QBs who they wanted. And, Jackson Arnold, I understand the logic behind the choice because of what he had shown in high school. But at the same time, and he was objectively awful last year at Oklahoma with terrible circumstances around him, to be fair, which again makes you think maybe we can get something out of him. And they just whiffed. Like, Jackson Arnold can't play. And like, that's just kind of like, if you gave them a decent quarterback, there's no discussion of Hugh Freeze hot seat. He just whiffed on QB twice in a row, I feel like.
Do you break glass and play Deuce Knight?
I think that's an extremely Hugh Freeze move, and the fact they have not done so, and the fact that Freeze said that Ashford and Arnold are both going to get starts or snaps rather in practice this week tells me about what I need to know as far as Deuce Knight's readiness to play.
Deuce Knight was like number 3 on my freaks list last cycle, right? You take his jumping metrics. I mean, he's a 2-time state champ in the high jump, but what he was able to do in the broad jump and the vertical jump, and you put him at the NFL scouting combine, like, he is beating the numbers that Anthony Richardson did a few years ago there in Indy. With that being said, raw as a passer, and he got better as a senior, missed some time due to injury. He's a dual threat talent. He's a lefty. I would be about kind of just seeing where he's at. I think there's going to be peaks and valleys, but at some point you gotta flash the future.
I mean, if you're Hugh Freeze, it's got to be all hands on deck to try to save your job, which it's probably too little, too late there. Finally, here, Brian Kelly, of course, LSU. I know Nussmeier's been hurt, but if you're an LSU fan, and I know quite a few of them, they're going to say, all right, so we're really going to waste 4 years of NFL QB play with Daniels and Nussmeier here? Okay.
Yeah, but they're number 11 in the rankings right now, number 6 in the SEC with only 16 commits. So, like, pound for pound, this recruiting class is very strong. And defensive line play has, I think, been an issue dating back to last season. And Blake Baker is going to blitz more than anyone, the defensive coordinator. Like, they find ways to generate pressures. I just think, again, from my vantage point, like, the personnel up front kind of leaves a little bit to be desired. And that's why I think LSU has to hold on to this defensive line class. It starts with Lamar Brown, two-way lineman, right?
Yep.
This kid could finish as the number one player in the country for us. And when we shot him up the board back in May, I said, like, how many teams around the country are happy with their offensive line? Not many. How many are happy with their defensive line? Not many. Well, this guy could be a problem solver on either side of the ball. He's right there in Baton Rouge. Guy they got to get him across the finish line. And then, a little further down the road, Richard Anderson at Edna Carr. I mentioned the term war daddy for Ruben Bain. Like, this guy's war daddy times 2. I mean, he is a big athletic stump. Edna Carr played American Heritage in the Dome there a few weeks ago. I mean, Richard Anderson took over the game as a 340-pound interior defensive lineman. So, LSU they did a lot of work in the transfer portal, right? But Lamar Brown, Richard Anderson are potential difference makers every single snap, and you're getting him out of the high school ranks. So who knows what happens with LSU, but I think they got to hold on to these two individuals. And the other thing, Bud, you brought up Garrett Nussmeier. What is the plan at quarterback? Bryce Underwood, we've seen him at Michigan.
You tell me, man, because I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they were – and Joe Sloan, excellent job with quarterback evaluations and all that stuff. But Bryce Underwood was committed to them all the way through November last year. All right, they didn't sign a high school quarterback. Michael Van Buren comes in via the transfer portal from Mississippi State, a guy that got some starts as a true freshman. They have a kid that they like in 2027 committed in Peyton Houston. But I've been kind of waiting and wondering which 2026 arm do they make a move on. They haven't done it yet.
Do we think that Van Buren or Hurley are a solution for next year? Like, are those guys legitimate contenders to start for them?
I would say Van Buren, yes. Hurley, he kind of falls into, was the reclassification smart for that quarterback? Still waiting for one of these reclass QBs to, break through.
It's smart in terms of moving up fast to get a paycheck, right? Yeah. Like, if that's your goal is to get the high school paycheck, yeah, I think if your goal is to get drafted, it's probably a pretty bad move.
Yeah, it's just interesting, and every case is certainly different, but like the college feedback when you ask about some of these quarterbacks that did, make the decision to skip their senior year, right? There's not a ton of them, but there are a few of them, and you ask the guys that are watching practice every day, and you kind of get the sense, no one wants to say it, but it's like, man, we probably should have stuck him in high school one more year. We shouldn't have called him up so early from the minors.
I feel you on that. All right, so around the country, we talked about Lamar Brown. Obviously, he posted the development is key tweet on Saturday, as you said, finished the number one player in the country. Got to hold on to that one if you're LSU. I don't know that LSU makes a move on Kelly this year. Maybe they do, or maybe they just kind of let him wear the losses that are probably coming next year. and then reset after. But man, that's not great to not be holding on, potentially to a guy like Lamar Brown. Here's a name everybody should probably know though. So CJ Barr, good God, CJ Carr's little brother Tommy Carr. He's a name to know now. Currently committed to Miami, Ohio. Looks like some Big Ten schools are finally starting to sniff around. And man, CJ Carr has played. I mean, he's got to be playing like a top 5 quarterback in the country right now. Like him, Simpson, obviously Sayin, Mendoza, probably missing 1 or 2, but like he is crushing. I wonder if the older brother playing so well has made people take a second look at the younger brother.
Yeah, bud. I was a big CJ guy coming out of high school, right? I think he was right around number 46 overall for us. I was a fan. I thought he didn't get enough credit for how he moved in the pocket. Elastic athlete CJ Carr was. I go back to that Miami game at first start. I thought he was kind of awesome. I know Notre Dame didn't win. It's just funny now, like 2 months later, like as you said, if we're ranking the quarterbacks in college football, he's up there. Well, his brother, Tommy Carr, kind of CJ Carr 2.0, right? Like a lot of similarities. He's at the same high school, Saline High School there in Michigan. Bud, Tommy threw for 508 yards and 8 touchdowns in a game last month. Accounted for 9 total touchdowns. And it wasn't like he was playing a bunch of nobodies. I mean, playing Michigan Division I football there. I just think Tommy Carr is a name to kind of put in the back of your mind, right? What normally happens when the coaching carousel spins? Okay, coach gets hired.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're going to get our staff together. Then usually, kind of the first order of business before, and remember the transfer portal's now later, right? It's moved further back, is you kind of find the quarterback that you want to go on. Your type of guy. And that's when that shuffling of the arms happens again. Tom Loy, as you mentioned, insider for 24/7 Sports, told me yesterday, hey, some Big Ten schools sniffing around here on Tommy Carr, who was committed to Miami of Ohio, right? Really good MAC program. They've had guys go on to the league, but I think he's a name to know. And I think his brother playing as well as he is certainly matters. And Bud, he's not the only quarterback with a brother who I think's benefiting from the older siblings play. Ty Simpson, his younger brother, Graham Simpson, in the class of 2028, one of the most searched profiles over the weekend on 247sports.com. A ton of traffic on his page. Max Prep's freshman player of the year there in Tennessee. He is not as tall as Ty Simpson, but hey, he's got some time. So, there's some brothers out there that are doing it at quarterback.
No doubt, man. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll talk a little more Bama next week if we can, just in the interest of expediency here. GM of the week, good friend of ours. We're going to give it to Barton Simmons of the Vanderbilt Commodores, 6-1, ranked in the top 10 for the first time since 1947. Anytime you're doing something for the first time, basically since World War II, that's a good thing, typically. Might be the only GM that still mows his lawn. Do you think does he listen to this recruiting hour? I know he listens to the reaction show.
Did you listen to the reaction show?
He does, yeah.
I was pressure washing on Sunday, and Barton's like, yeah, I normally pop on the cover 3 as I mow my lawn. I texted him. I said, Barton, you have to be the only general manager that is mowing your own yard still. And he says, well, hey, we'll see what happens this season. Maybe next year I'm not still mowing my lawn. And yeah, we're going to give it to Barton. Obviously, Barton has a lot of people on the cover 3 know him, but you're close with him. I worked with him, and I asked Barton on Sunday, like, hey, is there one, player or addition that you are super proud of? And obviously, Diego Pavia is the one who stirs the drink, right? Like he is what allows Vanderbilt to be what Vanderbilt has turned into. And Barton said it really wasn't one single player or transfer or high school recruit. He brought up the fact that, they lost a defensive tackle to the transfer portal. They lost one in preseason camp, and that has actually turned into a strength, right? Like they had the depth there in the middle of the defensive line. He says the defense improved across the board. CJ Hurd, my guy, the FAU transfer at safety, he was all over the field on Saturday. And just retooling that offensive line. But what also stands out to me about Vanderbilt, and it's a fascinating roster build, right? They got the high school guys, they got the transfer portal guys. I think they got the perfect scheme, and then I think it's the culture, right? Like they are the underdogs. They play with a chip on their shoulder, and I know Clark Lee has been a big driving factor in that, but Barton has had his hand in that as well. And me and Barton did a panel over the summer at the Player Personnel Symposium, and the topic was how do recruit rankings, dictate player valuation. And me and Barton for like 2 days were trying to figure out how we were going to tackle this subject, because Barton kept saying, we are not in the market for the high price tag players. We are not going after the 5 stars. We're not going after the 4 stars. He's like, I don't know why they're asking me to do this. Maybe it's because I used to be with 24/7 Sports, but I kept telling Barton, I'm like, well, you guys are kind of getting in the market for the blue chip players. They had Caden Harris, a corner committed that flipped to Georgia. I'm just excited to see, where this season goes for Vanderbilt. But let's say they do make the college football playoff, or they do play for an SEC championship. What couches and living rooms does that get Vanderbilt football into? Because I think, Barton and Clark are going to have to be very calculated about keeping that same, locker room and that same chip on the shoulder. And I'm sure they'll handle it. But, tip of the cap to Barton. Hopefully this time next year, he's no longer doing the yard work.
And it feels, hey, like maybe he just there's a lot of he's the only guy in that house, right? I'm not sure about the dogs. Like maybe he just needs to get outside, get away from it all. Obviously an amazing girl dad Barton is. So, but everybody needs a break once in a while. I think they have great synergy in terms of, so Clark goes out and hires the new staff, right, to bring in with the coordinators and especially the new offense. Doesn't it seem like they do a really good job of having a true understanding of what they need in that system in terms of strengths, and also, and importantly here, because you're not going to have unlimited cash to sign just unlimited 5 stars, which flaws in a player they can tolerate because their scheme doesn't require maybe that skill of that player. And I think that's a hallmark of all good general managers out there. I mean, certainly if you are, if you're at Ohio State, all right, cool. You know what? We're just going to all the sliders to the right. We're going to need about 100 on everything. But for everybody else, and even for them, in a modified salary cap era, you have to be able to understand, okay, we're going to take this kid. He doesn't do this. We don't need him to do this. Okay, we're going to plug you in here. Can we assemble a roster like a baseball GM does? Okay, I'm going to need 150 innings from this pitcher, but maybe this guy can give me 40. Maybe this guy can give me 70 over the course of the season. Can this D tackle, can he give you 150 snaps, right? Like that are functional in the SEC. And they just seem to have good alignment from understanding what they need to make that system go. And Pavia certainly is a big part of it. Like he's been, I think, mentality huge for them, but that team's also super physical. They are not just tricks. They're tricks, but they're knock your ass out with the sucker punch tricks. They bring some thump when they trick you too.
Well, I think a prime example, Bud, is hey, we're going to run most of our passing attack through Eli Stowers.
Yeah.
How many teams around the country have just, went into the meeting room and said, yep, this is our best offensive player, and we are going to funnel him the football. I'll add this, Barton's going to kill me for saying this. Vandy has a really good tight end committed out of South Carolina, Tilden Riley. I think this guy's a stud. So all these newfound Commodore fans out there, anchor down. I think Vanderbilt's the future of the tight end room is in good shape with Tilden Riley.
Absolutely, man. I'm fascinated to see what they do post Pavia, but I think all the people that think they're just going to go back to being what they were. There were more changes to that program than just Diego Pavia. He deserves a bunch of credit for being awesome, for changing the mentality in some ways, but it's a lot more than just him. I think it's a good pick for GM of the week. All right, evaluation of the week, and I'm glad you put pronunciation on here because I think I've butchered this a couple times. We've been talking about this kid on Cover 3 for a while because when I started watching BYU, I was like, oh man, yeah, this is number 11, right? Faletau Satuala, right?
Faletau Satuala, I think
Okay.
and Bud, I'm working and trying to improve on the West Coast names, right? You know, you're here in Florida, you get like a lot of like French, Haitian names. I am dipping my toes. I got Jaren Kiabe Sagapatelli, JKS. I got that one. I got Nico Imalieva, and you know, I had both those guys like say it into my voice recorder, and like I just kept playing it while driving. Shout out to BYU though, because they have Faletau. I think I'm saying it right. They have him pronouncing his name on the actual athletics website. One of the only schools I've seen that has done that. Awesome. Yeah, and he is, Bud, a Val of the week. And really, I just want to gas up Kalani Sitake there at BYU. But Satuala, big outlier for 24/7 Sports in the 2024 cycle. He was our number 11 linebacker. I know he kind of plays more of a safety role. We had him at the All-American Bowl, had him at the Polynesian Bowl. Huge riser for us late. 3-sport kid. As a senior, 13 receiving touchdowns, 6 interceptions. I mean, this guy was all over the field, and he picked BYU over Utah. You know, no one else really tried to go in there and pry this kid out. And this season, he's the highest graded qualifying defender for the Cougars in the Holy War on Saturday night. Career high, 12 tackles, 1 forced fumble, and 1 PBU. You know, BYU 7-0 in the college football playoff conversation. And you know, Sitake, since they have moved into the Big 12, I think there's been a massive uptick in recruiting. But BYU is tracking to sign its highest ranked recruiting class in the 24/7 Sports era. They're sitting number 23 right now. The past 14 years, that recruiting class usually finishes somewhere around 63. So to me, I don't know why Kalani Sitake is not getting enough love. He is 18-2 in his last 20 games, 11-2 in the Big 12. That, you know, they transitioned to the Big 12, 5-7 the first year, but since then, again, he's 18-2. And this recruiting class, you see Ryder Lyons, the 5-star quarterback up there, Brock Harris, tight end that can do a little bit of everything, Ty Gotchesi, another tight end out of Colorado. I think this guy's an NFL player. There are some gems in this recruiting class. Jax Tanner, a Navy All-American out of Idaho. They go to all different little pockets there. And, you know, once you dig into the commit list, you're like, I can see this guy playing. I can see this guy playing. And Faletau Satuala was one of those individuals for BYU.
I think he should start to get, you know, more credit. Obviously, we can nitpick it if you want to, but like ultimately, it's not that easy to win at BYU. You know, so you could say, okay, like you know, this has been a fairly easy schedule, or they win a lot of close games and whatnot. But still, like it's BYU. It's not like you're going to go out there and just kill everybody. You don't really have like Texas Tech style money. Even they lost over the weekend, obviously. So I think Kalani is a good coach. I just think his guys consistently show up for him. And that's not as easy to do as it sounds. Like those kids play hard for him.
One of my favorite like coach speaking sessions ever.
Yes.
Like,
were we at the same one?
Yes.
Yeah. Really good.
Like nothing on football, just life. And I was like, yeah, Kalani, what do you need me to do, man? Hey, you need me to, you know, eval some 27s? I'm ready to go. I'm on staff here. And just going to put this carrot out there. Wife is from Lakeland, Florida. So, hey, a lot of potential coaching changes in the Sunshine State. He's got some ties to Florida, which I think is odd for a guy that played at BYU.
It is. I would bet the BYU is going to pony up whatever it takes if somebody did come calling for him. This has been the the Cover 3 recruiting hour with Andrew Ivins. Make sure you check us all out on the socials at Bud Elliott 3 are you Andrew_Ivins?
Andrew_Ivins. Yes, Bud.
There we go. All right. We will see you guys again next week. This has been awesome, man. I'm glad we're doing this. We got signing day about 6 weeks away now, man.
You had to do math. I didn't know that answer. So I appreciate you, Bud.
See you, buddy.